So every year in the summertime, there's this giant agricultural show called the Royal Welsh Show. It's in Wales, obviously, and on Welsh TV, it's covered like it's the Olympics. I live on a farm, so naturally it's a big deal when it's on. And sometimes when I leave my room to go downstairs to get some more bubblegum, I'll see my dad watching the Royal Welsh Show. But then I'll just come back upstairs and keep making these silly videos instead of doing something productive like milking a cow. But sometimes I'll pause briefly and I'll see something on the screen that just grabs me. It'll be this blur of wool and people screaming and shearing and cider and vests. This is competitive sheep shearing, and it's a big deal. The Royal Welsh Show is a giant event, and competitive sheep shearing is a major highlight. Not only that, it's played all around the world by thousands of people, and it's fully a legitimate sport. Whenever it comes up on TV, I just, instinctively think, this is a bit weird, isn't it? And my family unanimously think no. In case you haven't already assumed by now, I'm not that great a farmer. My family have been much more involved with this sort of thing, whereas I've remained relatively distant. So from my perspective, it would make sense, that it seems a bit odd that a bunch of people are competing to see who can remove the hair of an animal the fastest. But going more into their perspective, it's not that weird actually, and now that I'm starting to think about it, they're kind of right. So I sat down with my dad and my gran, and I asked them some questions about competitive sheep shearing, and here's some of what they had to say.
Yeah, there's two types of shearing. There's speed shearing, which is where you shear the sheep as fast as you can in the shortest number of blows, and a blow is when is each stroke of your hand. And then there's the 9-hour record, I think. It's either 9 or 8 hours, and it's the quantity of sheep you can shear in that amount of time that has to be verified. I guess it's a sport because it's evolved. It's a job that needs doing, and it's evolved into a sport.
The easiest way I find to describe competitive sheep shearing is that it's basically just speed running for farmers. Sheep shearing isn't inherently a sport, much like games, but because there's such an engrossed culture around it, and there's always going to be this undying fascination of seeing someone do something you can do only faster and better, it's become such a big deal. And just like in speedrunning as well, this record is constantly getting broken to absurd degrees. Like the whole community is working together and finding strategies from the best type of sheep to use and like techniques and stuff to get the best time. It's insane.
And then an Australian called Godfrey Bowen invented this new style of holding the sheep where you sort of stretch the sheep out, and instead of going round and round its back, you go along its back, which means your clipper is in the wool for a lot longer. So that it meant you were cutting less times and you could shear the sheep quicker.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but you'd want a fairly standard sheep, maybe something like a Suffolk cross or a Taxel cross.
With this put into perspective, it doesn't really seem that odd. Like it seems like something that was bound to happen eventually.
It's rivalry between these young boys,
yeah,
young
is,
men. I'm better than you. And
it's just men trying to show each other.
That's right. I'm good. I gotta get faster.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's a good point. The whole it's been going for like decades and decades, but it's just spawned from men just thinking they can do something better than another man.
That's right, yeah. It's rather like the ploughing matches.
Yeah.
It's just the same with my...
Everything is a competition.
Yes.
You can look at it coming from, people that were just bored and were good at what they did and did it in competition with each other because it's their profession and it's what they can do the best, and it's fun to see who can do something the best when you're all very proficient at it. But also, like my gran mentioned, this aspect of very competitive maleness. There's a lot of very manly men that are farmers, so this, this sort of head-butting sheep shearing competition thing is just something that would happen. But also, it just shows a lot of passion and interest in something that it's taken to such a height that it's a sport. It's arenas, not arenas, but there's crowds and cheering, and it's just insane because it's just sharing an animal. It's this sort of like character that really draws me into it, that I find it so interesting. Like my mum got this book called Stitched Up by John Hutchinson, which is from some big Australian sheep shearing champion guy. And flicking through this book, you can just see there's so much like character and people and history all connected to sheep shearing, and such weird sort of iconography of shearers and all these weird like pictures and stuff, and there's like art around it and illustration, and the illustrations are really nice, and it's such a surreal and absurd thing to have such a strong culture surrounding it. Despite all this really interesting and rich character, there's still one thing that I find really odd, and that's the use of sheep. Unlike speedrunning, which evolved from a hobby into a sport, shearing evolved from a profession, and a profession that uses living animals. And those living animals are still very much a part of the sport. It's not like you can talk to a bull. Well, maybe you can, but a bull isn't alive, and if you touch it, it's gonna react predictably, determined by physics. But a sheep has a brain and independent thought, despite it literally being a sheep.
It is a bit strange when you think that the sheep's like a ping pong ball or something.
Like, imagine if footballs had faces on them, or they were like sentient beings. That would be just really messed up. And that's what messes me up about sheep shearing. Like, all these animals getting flung around in this mad dash of people competing to take their hair off. And it's just bizarre, like a competition where people see who can do their job the fastest, which entails shaving sheep at a rapid pace. Seems like something that would happen at like a wartime government scheme to encourage agricultural production. I am absolutely not implying that these competitions are cruel. These people are professionals, and if they're doing their job right, they're treating these animals with care and respect. Like, this video is not an invitation to expose anything questionable, but it's to shed light on this beautifully niche bubble of a sport that doesn't seem to reach anyone outside of its own community. It's so fascinating to see the shift of something that seems so practical. Like, you know, there could surely be no other purpose for shearing sheep other than to shear sheep. But seeing this grow into its own category of sport that surpasses any of the original intentions of shearing sheep is just insane, you know? Like, watching a group of people being able to participate and celebrate in something that they're passionate about and turning it into a game is, you know, it's something I commend. Hello, thank you very much for watching. This video is a bit different to what I usually do, so thank you very much for sticking around. If you liked it, please check out my other videos and subscribe because it helps out, and you can follow me on Twitter. And yeah, I'm sorry to anyone who expected this to be a Muppets video, but that one is in the works, I promise. Thanks again, bye bye.